She had forgiven the affair. She had forgiven the betrayal. She had even forgiven the wedding, that devastating church-lit afternoon that should have destroyed her, but instead became the first step of the greatest journey of her life. Ella John had made peace with all of it. She had built a life so beautiful that some mornings she stood in her soul kitchen, watching her daughter laugh and her husband drink his coffee, and she genuinely could not believe this was the same life that had once tried to swallow her whole. She thought the worst was behind her. She thought the chapter was closed. But there is a particular kind of secret, the kind planted in darkness by people who were certain they would never be caught, that does not stay buried forever. It waits. It grows roots in silence. And when it finally surfaces, it does not surface gently. It detonates. And on the night Ella discovered that her baby, the child she had mourned for 3 years, the loss she had made peace with, the grief she had carried like a quiet scar, had not simply been lost, but had been taken from her deliberately by the 2 people she had trusted most in the world. The woman she had become was tested in ways that even Seoul and Siwon and all the healing in between had not prepared her for. Because this was not a wound from before. This was a wound from beneath. And it changed everything. It began, the way so many life-altering things do, with a phone call she almost didn't answer. Ella was having one of the good mornings, the rare, uncomplicated kind where everything aligns. The coffee is perfect, Jisoo is cooperative, and the Seoul sunrise through the kitchen window is painting the city in shades of amber and rose that make you feel briefly and genuinely grateful to be alive. Siwon had already left for the office, but not before standing behind her at the kitchen counter for a long, quiet moment, his chin on her head, both of them watching Jisoo attempt to feed herself porridge with the chaotic confidence of a toddler who has decided utensils are merely suggestions. "She has your stubbornness," Ella had said. "She has your independence," Siwon had replied. Then, against her hair, "I'll be home by 7. 7, she confirmed. He kissed her temple, not her lips, not dramatically, just the quiet daily press of a man reminding her he sees her even when nothing needs to be said. And then he was gone, and Ella was in her kitchen with her daughter and her coffee, and the soft, settled feeling of a woman who has survived enough to appreciate ordinary Tuesday mornings. Her phone rang at 8:43. She glanced at it, an Accra number she didn't immediately recognize. She almost set it down. Something, instinct, fate, the quiet gravitational pull of truth that has been waiting too long, made her answer. "Ella?" The voice was female, quiet, threaded through with shame so thick it was almost a physical substance. "It's D-Day, David's cousin." Ella set her coffee cup down very carefully. "D-Day. I know it's been years. I know I have no right to call you." A pause, breathing, the sound of someone standing at the edge of something and forcing themselves to jump. "But I need to tell you something. I've been living with it for 3 years, and I think it's been killing me from the inside. And then I watched what they tried to do to you online with those articles, trying to destroy your name after everything you'd already been through, and I can't hold it anymore, Ella. I can't." The kitchen was very quiet. Jisoo was singing something soft and tuneless to her porridge bowl. "Tell me," Ella said. And the world shifted on its axis. What D-Day told her took less than 10 minutes. The words themselves were not complicated. The facts were not buried in ambiguity. They were plain and simple and so monstrous in their plainness that Ella's mind kept sliding off them the way water slides off glass, refusing initial absorption. While Ella was pregnant, 4 months, buying baby clothes, whispering names in the dark, David had been panicking. Not because he didn't care, but because a baby meant permanence, and permanence meant he could not slip away to Abina without demolishing everything. And Abina, who wanted David completely, had offered a solution. D-Day had been in David's apartment kitchen when she heard them through the wall, voices low but not low enough. She heard Abina say, in a voice so practical it was its own horror, "There are herbs, traditional ones. She doesn't need to know." She heard David hesitate, and she heard Abina say, "Just a little in her tea, David. Just enough." She heard the specific name of the compound, something used in certain traditional circles, something that in elevated doses could cause a pregnancy to fail while appearing entirely natural. 3 weeks later, Ella had miscarried.
"I told myself I was wrong," Dee said, her voice fracturing. "I told myself I misheard. But I didn't mishear, Ella. I heard it clearly, and I did nothing, and your baby died, and I have had to live with that every single day since then." The line was silent. Ella was standing in her kitchen in Seoul with the morning light still beautiful through the windows, and her daughter still singing softly to her porridge, and the coffee she had been enjoying 3 minutes ago had gone cold, and the entire floor of her life had opened up beneath her. Her baby was not simply lost. Her baby was taken. She pressed one hand flat against the kitchen counter. She breathed, in and out, in and out. The discipline of a woman who had learned that the first response to devastating truth must never be chaos. "Dee," she said finally. Her voice was perfectly steady. "Are you willing to put what you heard in a written statement?" A pause, then, "Yes, I'll do whatever you need, whatever makes this right. I know nothing makes it right, but whatever I can do." "I'll be in touch," Ella said. She hung up. She stood still for a moment. Then she turned back to the kitchen and finished making her daughter's breakfast, because Jisoo needed to eat, and the world, even a world that had just detonated, still required her to be a mother first. She was very good at holding herself together, but the moment Jisoo went down for her nap, Ella sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, and she let herself feel it. She pressed both hands over her mouth. She let the full weight of it descend. She felt it move through her. The grief for the baby she had named only in her heart, the rage at the people who had been in her home, at her table, drinking tea she had made for them with her own hands. The sickening realization that the coincidence she had made peace with had never been a coincidence at all. She cried on that kitchen floor for 40 minutes. Not the quiet, controlled tears she was known for, but the raw, animal kind, the kind that leave you empty and aching and strangely lighter, like a wound finally lanced. Then she stood up, washed her face, and called her husband. If this story is touching something deep in you, please hit the like button right now. It helps us keep making stories like this one. Siwon arrived home at noon instead of 7. She heard his key in the door and felt something inside her chest unknot just slightly. He came into the kitchen and stopped when he saw her face. She had composed herself, but she had long ago realized that composure was pointless with him, that he read her the way other people read weather, with a sensitivity developed from long attention. He crossed the kitchen without speaking, sat down across from her at the table, and said simply, "Tell me." So she told him. All of it. Every word of Dee's call, reconstructed precisely. She watched his face as she spoke. She watched his eyes. She watched the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. She watched him go very, very still. The particular stillness she had learned over years of loving him was not absence, but the opposite. The stillness of a man absorbing something with every part of himself simultaneously. When she finished, the kitchen was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the city outside, and the distant rhythm of Jisoo's sleep sounds through the baby monitor on the counter. Siwon stood up. He walked to the kitchen window and stood there with his back to her, and she watched his shoulders rise and fall on a single controlled breath. One hand came up and rested on the window frame. His knuckles, she noticed, were white. She had seen Shiwon negotiate with men who frightened entire boardrooms. She had seen him receive terrible news with the composure of stone. She had seen him move through crises that would break ordinary men with the efficient calm of someone who had been trained since childhood to never let anyone see the damage. She had never, in 3 years of marriage, seen him lose control of his body's response to something. His hand against the window frame was shaking. Just slightly. Just barely. But it was shaking. "Shiwon," she said softly. "I need a moment," he said. The words were perfectly formed. The voice was not. She stood up and crossed the kitchen and did something she had never done before. She put herself between him and the window. She turned to face him. She took his shaking hand from the window frame and held it in both of hers, and waited until he looked at her. When he did, his expression was the most unguarded she had ever seen it. Beyond the anger, the cold, enormous, barely caged anger, there was something else. Something that looked very much like grief. His grief for a child that had been taken before he knew she existed, before he even knew Ella properly. A loss that was not his, but that he was making his in this moment because he loved her, and what was hers was his, and what had been done to her had been done to them both.
"She had a name," Ella said quietly. "I never told anyone, but I named her before I lost her. Adwa." Shiwon closed his eyes, his hand tightened around hers. "Adwa," he repeated, like a man learning something sacred. "Tell me about her." And so Ella, standing in their kitchen in Seoul, with the city bright outside and their living daughter asleep down the hall, told her husband about the baby she had never been able to tell anyone about. She told him about the name she had considered and why she chose that one. She told him about the morning she had first felt movement, just the lightest flutter, like a butterfly landing for a fraction of a second, and the way she had stood completely still, afraid to breathe, afraid to disturb it. She told him about the tiny white sleep suit she had bought and then, after the miscarriage, had not been able to throw away, and had carried with her to Seoul in the bottom of her bag, where she never had to see it, but always knew it was there. Shiwon listened with his eyes closed, holding both her hands, his head slightly bowed, in the posture of a man receiving something he intends to honor. When she finished, he opened his eyes. "What do you want?" he asked. "Tell me exactly what you want, Ella. This is yours. All of it. The pain, the decision, the outcome. I will do whatever you tell me to do. But tell me clearly." She looked at him. She thought about what she needed. Not what would satisfy anyone else, not what the world expected from a woman who had been wronged this deeply. Not performance, not revenge. What she actually needed. "I want the truth confirmed and documented," she said. "I want my parents to know. Not from someone else, from me. I want Abina to have to stand in front of me and know that I know. And then I want to put it down, Shiwon. I want to put all of it down and walk away from it with my hands clean. Can you help me do that?" He raised her hands to his lips. He held them there for a long moment. "Yes," he said against her knuckles. "I can help you do exactly that." What followed was not the frantic, dramatic investigation of thriller stories. It was quieter than that, and in its quietness, more devastating. Shiwon's legal team worked with the specific, efficient precision of people who understood that the value of evidence was in its completeness. D-Day's statement was taken formally. A search for the woman who had sold the compound led to a market in Accra, to a woman who remembered the transaction with uncomfortable clarity, remembered the young woman who bought it, remembered the questions asked about dosage and how it might be disguised in liquids. She had not known what it was for. When she understood, the blood left her face. The evidence accumulated quietly, piece by piece, like tiles being laid. Through all of it, Ella and Shiwon continued living. This was the part that no one watching from outside would have fully understood. That life, real life, does not pause for its most important moments. Jisoo still needed to be bathed and fed and taken to her music lesson on Thursdays. The fashion label still had a collection due. Shiwon still had board meetings and the ongoing, delicate work of restructuring his company's darker holdings into legitimate ones. They still had dinner together in the evenings. They still lay awake some nights, talking quietly in the dark about the things that mattered. But there was a new tenderness between them during those weeks, a new kind of closeness born from the particular intimacy of two people carrying something heavy together. She noticed that he touched her more, not dramatically, just more frequently and more deliberately. A hand at her back when they moved through the apartment, fingers briefly covering hers on the dinner table. The way he sat closer than necessary when they were on the sofa together, as if proximity itself was a form of protection. One evening she caught him standing in the doorway of Jisoo's room, watching her sleep, with an expression she had never quite seen on his face before. Something fierce and tender and quietly furious all at once. He didn't know she was watching him. She saw him reach in and adjust Jisoo's blanket, very carefully, with the enormous gentleness that big, powerful men sometimes deploy with small children. All that strength redirected into the lightest possible touch. She went to him in the doorway. He put his arm around her shoulders without turning, pulling her into his side, both of them watching their daughter sleep. "She doesn't know," Ella said softly. "She never will, unless we tell her." "We will tell her when she is old enough," she once said, "that she had a sister who came before her, and that her sister is the reason her mother became the woman she is." A pause. That is not a sad story. That is the beginning of her understanding of who her family is. Ella leaned her head against his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" she said. "I have a very good teacher," he said, and she could hear the smile in it without seeing his face. Don't forget to subscribe. This story is only getting more powerful from here. They flew to Accra on a Friday. Her parents did not know they were coming. It was deliberate. Ella needed to walk into that house under her own power, unannounced, on her own timeline. She needed the visit to be hers from beginning to end. The family home was smaller than she remembered, the way places from your past always seem smaller once you have built something of your own. But it was warm in the way that had always defined it. The smell of her mother's cooking reaching the front path. The sound of a Ghanaian gospel station playing from the kitchen radio. The garden with the stubborn bougainvillea that her father had been trying to shape into something symmetrical for 20 years without success. Shiwon walked beside her through the front gate and paused for a moment, taking it in. "This is where you learned how to love people," he said quietly. "Most of it," she said. "Yes." "Then it made you who you are." He looked at the house, then at her. "And who you are is the only thing that has ever made me want to be better than I was." He said it simply, without ceremony. The way he said important things. She pressed her hand briefly against his chest. Then she opened the front door. Her mother's response to seeing her was immediate and physical. The sharp intake of breath, the reaching hands, the embrace that happened before words. Her father appeared from the back room and stopped in the hallway with an expression that moved through joy and then, reading his daughter's face with the particular literacy of parents who know their children completely, settled into careful concern. Shiwon greeted them with the composure and respect he always brought to her parents. The bow, the formal address, the deference that sat oddly but genuinely
on a man used to being the most powerful person in any room. Her mother, as always, was both charmed and slightly overwhelmed by him. Her father shook his hand with the grip of a man communicating something words couldn't carry. They sat together in the living room, and Ella told them. She had thought about how to do this on the 14-hour journey. She had decided that there was no version of it that was not going to be devastating, and that therefore the only gift she could give her parents was clarity. Not build-up, not softening, not architecture. Just the truth, plainly built. She told them about the text message she had found years ago, the one they didn't know she'd found, the one she had left the country rather than confront. She told them about D-Day. She told them about the compound and the tea and the statement now sitting in a lawyer's office in 2 countries. She watched her parents' faces move through confusion and then understanding, and then something that had no clean name. The devastation of parents who have discovered that one of the children they raised has done something their entire understanding of love cannot hold. Her mother made a sound Ella had never heard from her. A low, breaking sound, like something structural giving way. Her father sat forward and pressed both palms flat on his knees, staring at the floor, and said nothing for a very long time. Shiwon sat beside Ella. He did not speak. His presence was not passive. It was deliberate, warm, and solid in the way of a man who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer someone is simply the certainty that you are not going anywhere. "I did not come here to ask you to do anything," Ella said into the silence. "I didn't come to demand that you choose sides, or cut her off, or involve the police. That is not my decision to make for you. I came because you are my parents, because you have been treating what happened as though it was simply a painful love story, and you deserve to know that it was not." Her mother lifted her head. Her eyes were rivers. "Ella," she said, "my daughter." Not as a sentence, as a prayer. "I'm here, Mama," Ella said. "I'm whole. I'm not broken. I came here whole, and I will leave whole. I need you to know that." Her mother stood up and crossed the room and held her the way only a mother can hold a grown child, with the specific, ancient fierceness of someone who made you from their own body and has never fully released the responsibility of that. Ella let herself be held. She pressed her face into her mother's shoulder and stayed there long enough to feel, beneath all the grief and rage and years of distance, the original thing, the first love, the love that preceded everything else, the love that, whatever damage the family had taken, had never actually broken. Across the room she heard her father's voice, rough with controlled emotion. "Mr. Jion?"
"Sir," Shiwon said. A pause waited with things men don't not easily say. "Take care of her. Not because she needs it. She clearly doesn't need anyone to take care of her. A rough sound that might have been a broken laugh. But because she deserves someone who wants to. That," Shiwon said, "I can promise you, without reservation." Abina came on Saturday morning. Ella had not arranged it, had not called her, had not warned her. Abina came, as she apparently did every weekend now, for her mother's shopping. A habit, Ella suspected, driven less by filial duty than by the need to be in a place where someone still treated her as if she were simply a daughter, rather than the woman who had done what she had done. She came through the front door with a market bag and stopped completely when she saw Ella standing in the living room. The woman who stood there was not the Ella that Abina had last seen. This was not the heartbroken, displaced woman who had fled the country rather than make a scene. This was not the woman who had quietly swallowed her pain and gotten on a plane. This Ella stood in the room of her childhood with her spine straight and her chin level, and 3 years of building herself into something magnificent written in every line of her body. She looked at her sister. She let the silence sit for a long moment. She let Abina feel it. Then she said, quietly and without heat, "I know about the compound, Abina. I know about the tea. I have a statement from D-Day. I have a statement from the woman who sold it to you. I have enough for a civil case that would follow you for the rest of your life." She paused. "I'm not going to use it." Abina had gone the color of ash. The market bag slipped from her hand. "Not because you deserve mercy," Ella continued. "You don't. You took something from me that I will carry in some form until the day I die. You took my baby, Abina. Not David. You. You are the one who said the words. You are the one who knew what it would do. David is weak. You knew exactly what you were doing." The room was a held breath. "What I'm choosing instead," Ella said, "is this. My life. My husband. My daughter. My label. My joy. I choose all of that over spending 1 more minute of my energy on you and what you did." She tilted her head slightly. "But you will live with the full truth of it for the rest of your life. No more hiding. No more pretending it was just an affair. Mama knows. Papa knows. And you know that I know. That is your sentence. And it will be more thorough than anything a court could give you." Abina opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes were streaming silently, and she wasn't even trying to stop it. "Her name was Adwoa," Ella said. Her voice shifted on the name, just slightly softer, just slightly different, the way voices change when they are carrying something precious. "I thought you should know that." Then she picked up her bag. She walked past her sister. She paused at the doorway. "I hope," she said, not turning around, "that you find a way to become someone who deserves the life you chose. For your own sake, not mine." Then she walked out. Shiwon was waiting in the car. He looked at her when she got in. He read her face the way he always did. "Done," she said. He put the car into drive. He reached across with one hand and found hers, and held it all the way to the hotel. He didn't ask questions. He didn't fill the silence with analysis. He drove through Accra with her hand in his, and that was enough. That was everything. If this story has you feeling something, drop a comment below telling us which moment hit you the hardest. We read all of them. They named the Memorial Fund on a Thursday, in a short, formal press release issued from Ella's label. 1 paragraph, clean and unembellished. The Adwoa Foundation, in memory of Adwoa Osei, loved and named before she arrived, will support maternal health access for women across 3 West African nations, because every mother deserves the chance to bring her baby home. Shiwon read it over her shoulder at her studio desk before she sent it. She felt him go very still behind her. Then his hand came down on her shoulder, just resting there, warm and steady, and he said nothing. Sometimes the people who love you best know that certain moments are beyond the reach of words. She pressed send. The response was not what she expected. She had expected polite acknowledgement,
Perhaps some media attention given her and Shiwon's public profiles. What she did not expect was the flood. Thousands of comments and messages from women who had experienced pregnancy loss, from women who had survived betrayal, from women who simply needed to read those words and know someone else understood what it was to grieve something that the world had not seen. "I named mine too," one message read. "I've never told anyone. Thank you for making it okay to say it out loud."
Ella read that message sitting at her studio desk and let the tears come quietly, without fighting them, the way she had learned to let grief move through, rather than holding it at the door. Chisholm, her friend from the early Seoul days, called that evening. "You are genuinely the most extraordinary woman I have ever known," Chisholm said by way of greeting. "I'm really not," Ella said. "Ella, you named your stolen baby after yourself. You built a foundation. You looked your sister in the eye and chose peace over destruction, while being an excellent wife and mother and running a fashion label that's being featured in 3 countries." A pause. "You're extraordinary. Let me say it." Ella laughed, a real one, surprised out of her. "Fine," she said. "Say it." "You are extraordinary," Chisholm said. "And Shiwon is a very lucky man." "Don't tell him that. His ego doesn't need the assistance." "His ego," Chisholm said firmly, "is earned." The cherry blossoms came in April, the way they always did, extravagant and brief, and filling the city with the specific poignancy of beautiful things that do not last. The Han River path in Yeouido was lined with them, thousands of trees erupting in pink and white, petals drifting in the water and settling on the grass and landing in people's hair and on their shoulders like the city was being lightly, constantly blessed. Ella had always loved this week. It felt like Seoul at its most honest. Beneath all the glass and steel and commerce, this old seasonal magic that reminded you the world was still alive. They went on a Sunday, all 3 of them, plus Ella's parents who were on their first visit since the wedding. Her mother in a bright orange dress that made her look like the most beautiful woman at the river. Her father in slacks and his Sunday shoes, because no one had convinced him that a riverside walk in Seoul did not require Sunday shoes. Jisoo was everywhere at once, the way children at that age are everywhere at once, her natural puffs bouncing as she ran, shrieking with delight at the petals falling around her, periodically abandoning her collection mission to grab various adults by the hand and drag them towards something she had deemed important. She had her father's precision and her mother's soul, and some third quality entirely her own, a deep, uncomplicated joy that seemed to generate itself from within, requiring no external circumstances, no perfect conditions, simply existing as a property of her being. Ella walked beside her mother, their arms linked, watching Shiwon attempt to maintain dignity while Jisoo demanded he spin her. He spun her. 3 full rotations, her little hands wrapped around his forearms, her head thrown back, screaming with laughter, petals falling around them both. "He loves her," her mother said softly, not as observation, as gratitude. "Completely," Ella said. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "I have been wanting to ask you something." "Ask." "The compound, what Abina did." Her mother's voice was careful, each word placed deliberately. "Do you think you will ever fully forgive her?" Ella watched her daughter and her husband moving through the blossoms. She thought about it honestly, the way she had learned to think about hard things, not with performance, not with the answer she was supposed to give, but the actual truth of what lived inside her. "I don't know,"
she said. Some days I'm closer than others. Some days the stone comes back. She paused. But I've stopped measuring my healing by whether I get to the end of it. I think it's enough to be walking towards something. I think Adwa would want me walking towards something. Her mother made a small sound. She tightened her grip on Ella's arm. She would have been like you, her mother said. Quiet and then suddenly enormous. Still on the surface, ferocious underneath. You think so? I know so. Her mother leaned her head briefly against Ella's shoulder. She was yours. How could she have been anything else? That evening, after her parents had gone back to their hotel and Jisoo had been bathed and read to and sung to sleep with the tenacity that Siwon applied to all responsibilities, regardless of scale, Ella sat on the small balcony of their songbook home, wrapped in a blanket, the city of Seoul spread below her in 10,000 points of light. She heard the balcony door open. Siwon sat beside her, close enough that their arms touched, his long legs extended, his eyes finding the same skyline hers were resting on. They sat in the comfortable silence of people who have nothing to prove to each other. Siwon, she said eventually. I need to tell you something I have been thinking about. He turned to look at her. When I was on that bathroom floor in Accra, the night after the miscarriage, she said slowly, the worst part was not the physical pain. It was feeling like I was completely alone in it, like the loss belonged only to me because no one around me was willing to share the weight of it. David was already gone in every way that mattered. Abina was... She paused. Abina was making tea. She let that sit. I've been thinking about how different it would have been to have had someone who would have carried even part of that with me. Siwon was watching her with complete attention. And then I think about this year, she continued, and how you sat across from me at our kitchen table and asked me what I wanted, not what you wanted. How you flew to Accra with me and said nothing and held my hand. How you stood in Jisoo's doorway and called Adwa her sister like it was simply true, because it is. She looked at him. I just want you to know that I see it, all of it. I see every single thing you do, Siwon, and I need you to know that. He looked at her for a long moment. Ella, he said, the night I stood at that window, in our kitchen, when you told me what Didi said, when my hand was shaking, he paused. I was not angry in the way I am usually angry. It was something different. I kept thinking about you on that bathroom floor. I have never been there. I never will have been there. But I kept thinking about you alone in that, and something in me that I have spent 36 years building was not equal to it. It simply was not equal to it. She took his hand. The world I come from, he said quietly, taught me that feelings were liabilities, that the person who felt more in a situation lost the situation. I believed that for a very long time. He looked down at their joined hands. You are the only thing that has ever made me glad to be losing. She leaned over and rested her head against his shoulder. The Seoul night was around them, vast and lit and indifferent in the beautiful way of great cities, asking nothing of you, accommodating everything. She thought about the road, the church in Accra, the plane, the rooftop, the burgundy dress, the kitchen floor this year, the Accra living room. Adwa's name spoken out loud for the first time by two people who had loved her without meeting her. She thought, the road was long, and the road was brutal, and the road took things from me that I will never fully stop grieving. And the road brought me here, to this man, to this city, to this life that fits me so completely that some mornings I cannot believe it is mine. She thought, it was mine. All of it, the breaking and the building, all mine. I love you, she said, simply, like information. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. I have loved you, he said quietly, since a rooftop in Gangnam, where you were the only person in the room who was not pretending. Below them, Seoul breathed and glittered. Above them, the sky was clear and enormous, full of stars that had been burning for billions of years before either of them existed, and would continue burning long after. Indifferent to human grief, indifferent to human joy, and yet, somehow, in this moment, on this balcony, between these two people, seeming to lean in slightly, seeming to listen. There are stories that end when the villain is punished. There are stories that end when the couple finally kisses. There are stories that end with justice, clean, documented, delivered. This story ends with a balcony. Two people who should never have found each other, and did, because one of them was broken open enough by loss to get on a plane, and the other was paying enough attention to a woman in a burgundy dress to see what everyone else in the room had missed. It ends with a child asleep inside, who carries both of their best qualities and has invented several of her own. It ends with a name, Ajwa, spoken in the open air, no longer hidden, no longer a wound that had to be managed in private, but a name belonging to a daughter and a sister and a foundation and a love that did not end with a miscarriage, but instead became the seed of something the world could see. Ella John lost her first baby. She survived a betrayal that was never simply a betrayal, but an act of deliberate cruelty by people who should have protected her. She crossed an ocean alone, with nothing but herself, and she built something real and lasting and entirely her own. She found love in the last place she expected it. She told the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. She confronted the people who wronged her and walked away with clean hands. She did not do any of this perfectly. She did it the way real women do real things. Imperfectly, in progress, sometimes crying on kitchen floors, and sometimes standing at press conferences, and sometimes sitting on balconies in Seoul at midnight, held by the arms of a man who thinks that her soul is the greatest inheritance he could give their daughter. This is what strength actually looks like. Not armor, not the absence of pain, not the miraculous transformation from broken to invincible. Just a woman, choosing every single day to walk toward the life she deserves, carrying her grief and her joy and her name with equal dignity. Just Ella. And it is more than enough. If this story moved you, please like this video right now. It truly makes a difference and tells us you want more. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story we release. Leave a comment. Which moment in part 2 stayed with you the most? Was it the kitchen floor scene, the confrontation with Abena, or Shiwon's hand shaking at the window? Tell us. We read every single comment. Share this with someone who needs to hear that what was taken from them does not get to be the final word. We'll see you in the next story. Thank you for being here.